Hi, I'm Rachel Eliza Griffiths. I'd like to read this poem for you. It's called Seeing the Body. Seeing the body. She died, and in the spring of her blood, I remember my mother's first injury. Surprise of unborn petals curling red, then dark around her wrist. Some fruit she cut, some onion, some body with skin and sharp seeds. She fed me. She lived us and I. She held we and I. She kept speaking with those flowers falling from her blood, taking us across the sky to death. I remember her voice like a horn I never want to pull out of my heart. In the next life, which is here and here, I gather every mouth that ever sang my mother's blues. She burned and she talked back hard at God. Oh, my mother, she danced unbroken too. Bale of grief on my back, opening into something black I wear. A life of flesh like a petal or fruit or burning. I've carried everything and I'm tired. My mother survived and but she did not live. She told me nothing and she was waiting the entire time. How does the elegy believe me? Together we crossed the sky. There was a gate and we walked through the world like that. She wrote we and she was last or never seen, and brown eyes without life, opened her eternity when the air in her stopped, and she was last seen dying. She was too silent for the first time in her life. The spring of my mother's blood, hot in God, the dark, dark, beyond the closed door that won't move again. Seeing the Body was a poem I wrote in the wake of my mother's death. I was trying to figure out a way to imagine and to speak through that gulf of loss, of desire, of absence, and say the unsayable, to try to conjure up an identity after feeling like I no longer existed in a way. Seeing the body is a stretch between a former self or a former world and a new one, a motherless one. And in that same capacity, to find a space to transform and to grow and to continue my own arc of love. The poem itself, the engine of the poem is this kind of M dash and the word I. And I was interested, although that is an inadequate word, I was really holding on to this word I and this grammar. That was like my lifeline. It was a rope that felt like its tension was fraying as it kind of drops through the poem. And as I'm kind of falling through my own net and finding it bottomless, there is a way that repetition and remembering and memory happen. Love happens in the way that each of us attempts to touch each other, whether that's through poetry or film or a song or sharing a meal. And so the textures and sensations that go through the poem were some of the markers or ways that I could try to remember that I was still in the world despite this horrible grief. And being in the world meant that I couldn't despair, and that I would have to get up at some point and see the shape of the world, see the bodies of language, the bodies of my beloveds, the bodies of strangers, the bodies of those whose voices live even though they're no longer with us. And in that need to stand up and be held by poets, by the light and air and world, which is burning now, to be held by those things gave this poem a strength that I probably don't think I have or have the capacity for in my everyday life. And I think that is what this poem and other poems that I turn to in grief and joy and love, desire, longing, loneliness, I think this is the kind of poem whose intuition and mystery speak to the miracle of how we get through each ordinary day, and the pleasures and the dreams, and then the actual labor of making it through.